everybody. Welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we're going to be talking about the deliberately developmental organizations, otherwise known as DDO, and we're going to be talking to Andy Fleming, who is a contributor to this wonderful book called An Everyone Culture, Becoming a Deliberately Developmental Organization. So welcome.
Thanks, CJ. Good to be with you again.
So this is a follow-up. So we had talked last week on talking a little bit about, what are DDOs, otherwise known as deliberately developmental organizations. So what are DDOs and some examples of the kind of practices? And what I thought we could do now is to, in this part of the interview, talk a little bit about how we would get into the meat and potatoes of this. But before we do that, I wanted to find out about how you got involved. Like, how did you get started with this work, and what brought you to DDOs?
Yeah. It's, and I'm gonna ask you, CJ, if I go too long on this, pull me back
Okay.
or redirect me. But for me, it actually goes back to growing up and observing my dad's experience of work. My parents both were lower middle class background. My dad bootstrapped his way up a company. And I observed when he would come home at night after work, my three siblings and I began to have a ritual of asking him, how was your day, Dad? And he would hit the back door at 6 o'clock every night. It got to be kind of almost a joke in one sense, but there was also something that wasn't so jokey about it. And his one-word answer would be rotten.
Wow.
And I see your sort of face goes, as I look back and I go, my gosh, that's my dad. And there were many, great things about his career and many good experiences and terrific people he worked with. But I kind of grew up with this sense that, when you become an adult and you go into the work world, you're going to experience a fair amount of rotten.
Right, yeah.
By various circumstances, I happened to get onto a kind of a fast track. We grew up just by accident, next to a very prestigious private school. I went to a private high school. I went to Yale. I was captain of the Yale basketball team. I worked for 3 years for a Fortune 500 company. I went to Harvard Business School, was kind of on the track, This is the mid-'80s. I was interested in consumer products marketing. I got on at Procter & Gamble, was going up envisioned myself going up the path, and hit a wall. And hit a wall very early on in terms of the nature of the work that I was doing and my level of interest in it, and my experience of the workplace. And P&G is a terrific company, and they were great to me. But I left and started asking myself, do I really want to spend, my life energies, doing what I was, sort of asked to do?
Right.
And it led me to a period of really intense introspection. And I actually wound up writing a book about the period. I went out and I interviewed people, and found got their stories. And in the course of hearing their stories, people who had been, on the fast track or in some way, shape, or form, it began to help me reflect some on mine. And over time, a long period of time, with the help of a great mentor, I began to develop a different perspective on work and on shaping one's life. Began to develop a sense of purpose, that what I wanted to do was I wanted to help other people better integrate who they are with what they do. I wanted to help people better integrate, and I'm going to use the word, and I want to say it carefully, I want to help people integrate their faith and their work. Not necessarily religious faith, but their centers of meaning and value, the things that are most essential to them. My perspective became that I think it's possible to integrate that with what you do every day. And so through various circumstances and some choices that I made, I found myself doing leadership workshops for a pretty big company, and doing that once I paid off some of my Harvard Business School debts. Doing that as almost a stepping stone to going to seminary.
Seminary. Wow. Okay. Wow.
So I'm a bit of an odd duck. So probably not too many Harvard Business School grads wind up going to seminary. Right. So what brought me to Atlanta actually was to go. Emory University has the Candler School of Theology, and to my great fortune, when I showed up at Candler, I was asked, everybody was asked in a class that we were in to share a little bit about your story and tell your classmates why you're here. And I knew I was there. I was there to learn how to help people better integrate their faith and their work, who they are with what they do. And a young woman sitting next to me, a classmate of mine, sort of grabbed my arm and said, what are you doing on Tuesday nights? And I actually was single at the time, and that was an interesting question to be asked. And I said, well, I really don't know. What do you have in mind?
Yeah.
And she said, you don't have a choice. There's a professor who teaches a class on Tuesday night by the name of James Fowler, and you and he have to meet. You have to take his courses. You have to read his books, because what he has researched and studied and written about is what you're interested in. And it turned out to be the greatest break in my life that James Fowler, Jim Fowler, who in theological circles people would know from a book that he wrote called Stages of Faith, it integrated ideas around human development and how people grow, which was something I desperately needed then and still needed, today. But integrated ideas around human development with ideas around values and vocation and spirituality. And Jim's work I just found so enlivening and just incredibly vital for me. And I got interested in this whole sort of human development kind of body of thinking and body of work. And Jim, while I was, taking every course I could with him and, hanging out with him as much as I could, he became head of something at Emory called the Center for Ethics. And God bless Jim. He created an area in the center. He called it Leadership, Life, Work, and Vocation. And sitting across from me as he was telling me this, and the drool is coming down my face, and he looks at me, he goes, and I'm creating it for you.
Oh my goodness.
And I envision you working there part-time and, going to school and all that. And I envision you doing workshops for undergraduates and graduate students, business school, law school, medical school. Other than that, you'll have to make it up. And so I had the great privilege and fortune of working with Jim and some other incredibly talented colleagues at the Center for Ethics for 5 years. And we did, some of what Jim envisioned. And in the course of that, I got connected to some companies in the corporate world where I was still doing some leadership stuff on the side. And one company invited me to help them architect a leadership institute for them. And then one thing led to another, and I wound up being the lead facilitator for their sort of week-long series of leadership institutes. We had the top 500 people in the company. And they got named shortly thereafter, they got named the #1 best company to work for in America. Fortune magazine's, does that annual 100 best companies to work for. They got named #1. And people started calling him up and asking him, who does your leadership training, all that sort of stuff. So there I was. I started to have a business and have had one form or another business the last 15 or 16 years. And over time, though, I realized, though, that doing workshops, even deep level individual coaching, which I got into, although it contributed, it made a difference for people, that came to realize that if the company culture was not sort of conducive to people's growth and development, you could light people up, you could light up individuals, but really, what have you accomplished if you're putting them back into a culture that doesn't recognize and celebrate and value and work to draw forth, more of their gifts and more of who they are? And so that's troubled me, troubled me in a good kind of way, because it made me really think about what could be done in that arena. And about 6 years ago or so, kind of a light bulb went off. And in the meantime, I'd gotten married, not to the woman in the seminary, but to my wife, Claire, who's also into sort of development. She's a developmental coach. We began working together along with some other colleagues. And about 6 years ago, I had this kind of epiphany, I guess, that in the 21st century, it's not enough to be a great place to work. So we have a pretty good understanding of what it means to be a great place to work. We'd actually helped another company get into the top 15 on the Fortune list. And so, treating people with respect, with fairness, building a trustworthy organization, having good benefits and all those kinds of things. All those are fabulous things. And we salute any organization that, takes that seriously and takes that on. But in the rapidly changing 21st century, our perspective is being a great place to work is not enough. You've got to be a great place to grow. And a great place to grow, not just for your quote unquote high potentials, but for everybody. And so that was kind of an idea that we started carrying around with us. And through various fortunate series of events, we had been introduced to Robert Keegan from Harvard, who in the field of human development is like the rock star in that field, an international figure who's really one of the pioneers in looking at how adults in particular can grow. And as it turns out, Jim Fowler, my old mentor at Emory and friend and a colleague and boss, had been a colleague of Bob Keegan's at Harvard in the late 70s. And we at the center, we'd invited Bob Keegan to come down and do some workshops at Emory in the mid-90s. And so I met Bob and I started following his work. And he and Lisa Leahy, another faculty at Harvard, had actually written a book 4 or 5 years ago called Immunity to Change that summarized their work largely in helping individuals and teams develop and their methods and models to help that. But in the last chapter of their book, they had said, we've mostly focused on individuals and teams, but what might it look like if a whole organization so valued the development of its people that it sort of created a kind of culture that swept everyone into the developmental journey? Might we call such an organization a deliberately developmental organization? And I read that, just literally sitting there reading the book, and I read that, I go, that's the great place to grow idea. They're onto it. I'm going to reach out, and long story, slightly shorter, Claire and I reached out to Bob and Lisa. We had a series of conversations and found that we were in sync and decided to throw in together and create the entity Way to Grow, Inc. With the idea of first, let's research and see if we can find, are there any DDOs that exist? And then if we study them, maybe we can draw forth some of the principles that would make it possible for other organizations to go down the path.
Right.
So the book that you so nicely held up there earlier, that's the fruit of it.
I see. So this is the summary of your research from looking at what are other DDOs out there? What are they doing? And how can other people who want to adopt these practices follow suit?
That's right. What are the core principles
Right.
that would enable people to, sort of take some of the ideas from these other companies, but also more specifically draw from some of the science of human development, kind of the theory of human development.
Right.
What the three companies in the book, Bridgewater Associates, Decurion, and NextGen, we have such admiration for them. They were kind of out on their own. They didn't know each other. They were creating a kind of new way to be a company, really. And what they did is phenomenal. And we, are privileged to observe them. And, Bob and Lisa have this wealth of knowledge about human development to be able to look at them and say, well, if we could take what they do and relate that to the theory of human development and what we know about how, you can accelerate human development, and if we were able to make that accessible for more organizations, what might that do in the world? And
see.
Could we create, at scale, the possibility that more and more people would be able to experience work in a way that enables them to integrate who they are with what they do, enables them to live out more fully their values and their sense of purpose in the world. Become, one of the ways we talk about it is enable people to become a better version of themselves. So that's kind of the origin story
I
behind
love that
this.
story. Why would I want you to shorten that at all? That is that is an amazing story. I'm so completely fired up. That is a beautiful story in so many different ways. Wow, I just love I love your own spiritual journey, right? Because in that story is your own journey towards finding yourself.
Right.
Like you're finding yourself as you're finding out this work. I mean, it's just a beautiful story.
And yeah, CJ, I mean, I've been on edges. We talked in the earlier, conversation about, the dimensions of a DDL as being edge, home, and groove. An edge means being outside of your comfort zone. But outside of your comfort zone, because I'll just speak personally. There's things I've had to do and had to learn how to do to try to help, move this forward. And the only thing that sort of propels that for me is the fact that I have a bigger sense of purpose about this. I know in my bones what it feels like to be lost in the world. I know what it feels like to live a disintegrated life, where what you're doing every day and who you are is disconnected. I know what that feels like. And once I kind of got in touch with that, I could see it in so many other people in organizations. And so I have this, I do have this kind of passion around this that God knows, we could be doing our company better. There's so many things we could be doing better. And I'm blessed with a spouse and colleagues who will point that out to me and help me with that. But, you're right. Me, my wife, Claire, Bob and Lisa, others who are part of our team, Matt Miller from Harvard, Deb Helsing also connected to Harvard, and others, we're all on our own developmental edges. And we're all on those edges on behalf of what we think is a really big idea. We think it's a big idea.
It's a huge idea. It's a huge idea because it's so. This is this is what we all need for our souls, right? I mean, there's a sense of missingness. I think that I feel when I coach with people, there's something missing, and our souls just feel lost and confused. And so, if you can be every day having your work be a spiritual practice, so to speak. I know you don't maybe a faith-based whatever word, because every single word is going to trigger you, right? But if it's about personal growth and meaning and purpose, I mean, that would just be such a hugely different world. Like, think about the kind of world we can create if you have that kind of mindset, and the kind of products we can create. I mean, those kind of products are enriching because they're an expression of our soul. They're no longer just kind of like, we're making stuff on an assembly line and just trying to get stuff out there. It's like, no, this is actually really important. And so it is hugely different. And I want you to succeed because I think it's so important. Honestly, truly, my heart of hearts, I approach it from a slightly different lens about increasing consciousness, because I think if we're more conscious and aware and intentional about what we're doing every single day, at work, at home, wherever we are, it's going to create a better world. And so I think these DDOs are one way of doing that, because there's somehow we have, like you said, there's a compartmentalization of our lives, right? At work, I have to act this way because there's a culture, as you say, that says I have to act this way, or I don't get paid, basically, right? Or I'm not doing a good job. So there's at work we have something, and at home we're like this loving, great person who at work we're just completely. And so to actually have those two things be integrated together into a whole life versus one in which you have to act differently is God, it's hugely aspirational, and I hope it happens, because if it doesn't happen, I think we're just going to get more of the same. I mean, I think some of the problems that we have today are a result of this disconnect between soul or spirit or whatever you want to call it, and how we spend our lives. There's a disconnect. So
and just to connect with you very much on this idea of levels of consciousness too, and that's very much a part of kind of the science of human development. The idea is that as we grow, our consciousness, our ability to take in more of reality and connect with more of reality increases. Einstein's old saying, that I'll probably butcher the quote, but that we can't expect to solve our problems from the same level of consciousness that created them. And so when you really step back, we need our schools, our businesses, any institutions and organizations to be kind of furthering people's growth and development, because we do have things that we've got to resolve. We have problems and challenges in the world that we're not going to be able to solve unless there's some kind of lift in folks, in all of us, individually and collectively. So one just to go back to kind of the aspirational side of things. Next Jump, one of the companies that we study, their purpose is to change the world by changing workplace culture.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Flat out. And Charlie Kim, their CEO, go check them out on YouTube. They are serious about this deal, and they're giving away their practices and their approaches, and I know for a fact Decurion has the same sort of orientation toward wanting to make available the approach that they have. That's why they participate in the book. And the same with Bridgewater Associates. And even before our involvement with them, Ray Dalio, the founder of it, has made publicly available online the book of over 200 principles by which they run their organization. It's been downloaded over 1 million times. There's also another terrific book, if I might add. It's called, by a friend and colleague of ours, Ed Hess. It's called Learn or Die. And he's also done a deep dive into Bridgewater as well as other organizations. And we're pointing at the same thing, that organizations need to be places that help people grow. And part of the reason we wanted to write the book and tell the stories of these companies is, and we're much more at the beginning of this work, CJ, than we are at the end. I mean, we're just getting this idea out there and so forth, and, getting some tools and so forth out there. But we wanted to actually just put a stake in the ground out in the world and say, it's possible.
Right.
It's actually possible for this to happen. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not that these are soft places.
Right.
They're not soft places to work. The expectations are high.
Right.
Growth requires challenge and support.
Right.
So it's not. We're not saying you go work for one of these companies and it's going to be a sort of a
puppy dog and unicorns. Right. It's not that world.
Yeah. But we want to say, also want to say, for most of us, it's true that nothing's ever, that ultimately satisfying come about because it was easy.
Right.
And then it's actually in the challenge and in the struggle to not only grow ourselves, to also help others grow, but to also participate in kind of co-creating an organization and co-evolving the culture that enables that to happen.
Right.
That struggle in and of itself is a struggle that can be, sort of the seedbed for people's growth and development.
Right. It's
So
interesting. I come at it from a slightly different angle. I mean, I come to the same conclusion, but because I'm a tech person, my background is in tech. And so I look at the technologies that we're creating and we're going to create with robotics, and more, a lot of the typical repetitive and maybe not so repetitive things are going to be territories that robotics and computers and machine learning can actually do a lot of what we can do as human beings, in some cases better than we can do as human beings. And if you go down an apocalyptic end, you say, oh my gosh, your computers are going to take our jobs, we'll have nothing to do, what's the purpose? So that you can go down to that apocalyptic end and say, oh my god, the machines are going to just destroy us. But then another way of looking at it is like, yes, like those things a machine can do better. Those are the machine-like aspects of our humanness that can be taken over by the machine so that we can evolve our humanness in the best form. And then I look at what you're doing and I go, okay, that is the panacea to this kind of, oh my god, what are we gonna do? It's like, well, you're gonna grow yourself. You're gonna use work as a way to grow yourself, to find purpose, to feel passion about your job. So from my angle, I come to the same conclusion, but it's from a very different kind of direction. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Let me see if I can connect a little bit with you around that. There's a terrific book that came out, I think last year, by Jeff Colvin, who writes for Fortune, but has also written some terrific books. A couple of years ago, he wrote a book called Talent is Overrated. But his more recent book is Humans Are Underrated. And he takes on the question that you're talking about, CJ, and as the guy I mentioned to, Ed Hess, also great friend, mentor of mine, takes that on. But Colvin's book is about how in the workplace of the future, that is going to include, robotics and smart machines and so forth. But that what we're going to need actually more of are full human capacities, the capacity for empathy, the capacity for strategic thinking. Our higher order human capacities are actually going to be more in demand.
Right.
And so I look at it as an imperative then for our schools, starting very young, but our schools, our colleges, and our workplaces to be places that incubate that capacity,
right.
To bring out sort of the fullest and best versions of ourselves, our most human capacities that we can.
Yeah, and they're getting there. Like I look at my sons who are in private schools, both of them, and I look at kids that are public schools, and it's about giving back to the community. But right now they're the remedial stages, so I actually applaud them that they're doing anything right and actually understanding different people and their perspectives, and there's all sorts of stuff on like this generation that's being raised in the schools are way more open to gender differences. They're way more open to just different races, genders, everything, and giving back to community. That's why the millennials are so out of sync because they've been raised in these educational environments where they're expected to do those things, and then they get into the corporations, and the corporations are like, what? No, there's a hierarchy, there's a game. You're not supposed to be working in teams. You're all supposed to be like competing, for raw meat. So there's just this gigantic disconnect with millennials and how they've been trained, because there's some deepest sense, I think we know the truth that human beings need these kinds of things like empathy and love and caring for others, and they're being taught at kind of a remedial level, but they're still being taught, and then they get to the corporation and it's like they don't, unless you do have one of these DDOs, which actually understand that this is the connection between the new incoming workforce and the existing workforce, and it's actually beneficial to both, right? I think that's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the companies, as we said before, the companies in the book are tremendous performers by any standard business measure.
Yeah.
They outperform others in their industry.
Yeah.
So
I want to, I love this conversation. I feel like I haven't delivered on what we said we'd give the audience. So can we try some of the things? I mean, I could talk about this forever, especially with you, because you have a lot of deep thoughts and incredible academic background to all this stuff. What I want to do is, if we can we talk about our edge? And there's this wonderful diagram, and I was thinking, this is just fabulous. You have this, and it's called the Immunity to Change Map Template, which you had mentioned that Robert and Lisa, this is the very first book that they created, and it has this template, which I don't know if people can see, but it's extremely simple, right? And the 4 columns are your commitment. So you're looking at the things that you're committed to do for your personal growth, what you're doing or not doing instead. The 3rd column is hidden or competing commitments. And the 4th is big assumptions, which we talked in the previous episode. And so I was wondering if you could walk us through what this would look like. Either your own example, or we can maybe you could coach me and help me how to fill this out. I have a problem that I am committed to getting better at. Do you want to try? Okay. And so what I'm going to ask the listeners to do is, so this is an example of how someone would develop their own edge. So let's say that I'm trying to, I have a work objective, and my work objective is now making me realize. So I think one of the things that's kind of interesting, because the two of us probably have done a lot of personal development, but for myself, what happened is I noticed myself. The first thing is noticing that something's gone awry, right? So I was noticing that I wasn't breathing. It sounds stupid, but I wasn't breathing as deeply, and I found myself rushed, and I found myself making mistakes. When I was writing emails, like I was making more and more mistakes. And why was I making more mistakes? Because I was rushed. And why was I rushed? Because I had the sense that I didn't have enough time to do something. And I thought, wow, that's not good. Like if I keep on going down this path because I'm having more and more things added to my plate, this is not the place I want to be. And so I thought, well, how can I actually be more present? Because there were little glimmers of hope during my increased work time that I had pressures at work right now, where I could see that when I'm completely present, I'm not thinking about the future. Oh, when does this project due? Or the past, like, oh, I have to make sure that I do this and this and this project. But if I was completely in the present, I can actually do the work more productively and in a way that feels kind of where my heart is leading, in a present kind of way, versus my head like worrying and being concerned and wondering what so-and-so is going to say when I'm typing whatever, that I could do a much better job. So if I were to fill out this chart, it would say I'm committed to getting better at being present when I'm doing anything, when I'm working. and not thinking about the future or the past, but just presently being in my heart and expressing from that place. That's what I want to be.
Okay, that's terrific. That's a great improvement goal.
Okay.
So if we were going down the path on this, and typically it takes a little bit longer than what we'll have time to do here.
Yeah,
but
just
let
a
me see if I
shortcut,
can
just to give me flavor, appetizer version.
your flavor. Yeah. So you would write into that first column. Want to get better at being present. You might also put, what would that give you if you were able to be more present, so that you had kind of a picture of the benefits that would flow from that as well.
Yeah, peace and
But
presence.
now, yeah. And then the second column would be, what are the specific behaviors that you're doing or not doing that are undermining that goal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if your goal is to become more present, more consistently, what are you actually doing or not doing?
Okay,
That
so
work against that
I'll
goal?
just do one, just to give an example. So one of my behaviors is that I'm actually, I find myself distracted. So I'll actually go to Facebook. I'm like, that's not productive. Like, why are you doing that? So I kind of numb out from the pain of I found two behaviors. One is that I'm sitting too long, so I try to force myself to finish the business plan. And when I do that, I'm sitting at my computer desk for like 3 hours, and it's too hard on my body. My body doesn't like that. So then I have to actually distract myself during intervals so I can stay there for 3 hours, which results me in looking at Facebook. So those are behavioral things that I'm doing that are antithetical to this goal.
Okay. So let's just take the one that you'll sit for long periods of time and try to finish something that you're working, right? Okay. So and typically what we do when we go through this exercise, and what encourage folks to do is actually come up with a long list of things that you're doing or not doing that are getting in the
All
way.
the
A long list
behaviors
of
that are,
behaviors. Yeah, so we sometimes we'll call it a fearless and searching inventory.
Okay.
Another way we'll say it is to tell on yourself a little bit.
Right.
Okay. And it's just behaviors that we're looking for. So you get this list of behaviors. But let's say then that you said, the one of the ones that's most significant for me is I sit for too long.
Right.
Okay. So and try to cram in too much work in a short period of time. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're going to go to column 3, the first half of column 3, which gets at sort of what we call your hidden fears, or sometimes we'll call it your worry box.
Right, my worry box. Okay, that's what goes in the box here. Right.
Yeah, that's right. That's in the box, top of column 3. And the way to get stuff in there is to take one item from column 2, and we've chosen the one, sit for long periods of time and try to get, work done, and say, imagine yourself doing the opposite of that behavior. Mm-hmm. So imagine yourself not sitting for long periods of time to try to get your work done, right? To try to crank it out. So imagine yourself not doing that.
Yeah, so my worry is I'd be afraid I wouldn't finish the work.
There you go. Okay, so the big fear is that you're afraid that you wouldn't finish the work. And if you didn't, just to play with this a little bit, CJ, just to see what comes out. And so what's so bad about not finishing the work?
Okay, so
if you didn't finish the work.
In coaching, they call going down the elevator. So I'm just going to go down all the way to the elevator because I know I've done enough work to know. If I don't finish the work, then I'll feel that I'm underperforming. If I'm underperforming, I'll feel like I'm a loser. And if I'm a loser, I'll feel like I have no value. So like whenever I go down that tunnel, I have no value. That's what happens. That's what the ultimate fear is.
Gotcha. Yeah. So the big fear is that I'll feel like a loser and I'll feel like I have no value. Right. So the second part of column 3 then gets at what we call your hidden commitments. And and there's some different ways to come at this, but I'm going to be more telegraphic with you. Okay. Both for lots of different reasons. Just I'll go straight at it with you. That what I'm hearing in that bottom column is that you actually have a commitment to not feeling like you're a loser.
Right, absolutely.
You're committed to not feeling like you have no value.
Right.
Right. And so you will do anything to not feel like a loser.
Right.
Or to not feel like you have no value. So now what I want you to look at, and a good diagnostic is to say, okay, do these hidden commitments in column 3 that I'm committed to not feeling like a loser, I'm committed to not feeling like I have no value, do they help explain why you're doing some of the things in column 2?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Because I'm fearing those things, so I can't stop myself because I need to accomplish finishing that business plan. And if I stop, I may not go back to it because there's some parts of me that are, I don't really want to finish this, and so I'm afraid that I won't go back and finish it. So that's the big assumption, that if I stop, I won't finish it.
Okay, so there you go. You've already helped us bridge over from column 3 to column 4, which is about looking underneath those hidden commitments and really looking underneath the whole map to surface what are some of the big assumptions. Another way of saying that is kind of we call them limiting assumptions or big assumptions. A colloquial way of saying that might be your old stinking thinking that sort of that holds you back. And so you named one. Okay, you named one that said, if I stop, I won't go back. Okay, I assume that if I stop, if I take a break, I won't go back. Okay. So, and we could, go through and develop a much longer list.
This is a short version. Yes.
But let's assume that we've done that, and let's assume that we've had some conversation, or you've done some reflection and said, you know what? I think that's one of the really significant big assumptions for me. And what in our approach, we would say you've now done a great job of surfacing a limiting assumption, okay? And this map, this ITC map we call it, has helped you do that. Now, there's other ways you can surface limiting assumptions. We don't want to say this is the only way you can do it. Bob and Lisa just happen to have developed this over 15 or 20 years, and it's proven to be a very good way to do it and a quick way to do it. Okay, but there's other ways to do it. But so now you've surfaced a limiting assumption and maybe multiple limiting assumptions. Now the next part would be to engage or test those limiting assumptions. So to ask yourself, is that really true? That if I stop, that I won't go back. And so the next part of the work we would have someone do, and that you could do in your work context, that you could be sharing with someone else your experiments around this, would be to actually, maybe an experiment would be, well, I am going to stop, and I am going to take some breaks, and let me see what happens if I take some breaks.
Yes, and I've done that because I actually read a book. And I thought, okay, and they say take a break. So I have a meditation timer that every 20 minutes it gives me a timer on where I am in an hour. They say that the theory in science is that you're supposed to take a break every hour because that will make you more productive. You move around. It's good for your body. It's good for your mind. It's good for everything. So now after every hour goes, I have an intermittent time that goes on every 20 minutes so I can kind of pace things. And then after an hour, I force myself to get up and walk around or get a drink or do something else that's not sitting at the desk. And then I go back, and I do go back. And what's interesting is my mind is actually more focused because I gave myself the break.
So you've given a great example of actually going through the whole sort of process that includes surfacing the big assumption or the limiting assumption, then engaging it, testing it, because you tried those. So let me try it differently, and then observe. You're almost like a researcher.
Right.
Just observe what happens, collect the data,
right.
What happens, and then reflect back. Does that data tell me something about my big assumption?
Right.
And,
my big assumption is wrong. But then what happened from that mini experiment is I thought, oh, but what was happening is every 20 minutes I go gong, and I was like, I try to get as much. I was trying to pace myself so I'd fit within that 60 minutes, and I thought, well, that's not good either, because then you're no longer present, which is the whole idea of this stuff. So like I'm sitting there like an agile thing. I'm constantly refining and refining and refining.
That's perfect, and doing it in an iterative kind of way.
Right. Yeah.
So one experiment or working on one big assumption isn't a guarantee to lead to nirvana.
Right.
But it can sort of get you going and open up a different kind of future for you.
Right. Absolutely.
And so now imagine, CJ, just to tie it back to the DDO idea.
Yeah.
Now imagine that you were in a workplace, a work setting, where 4 other people were doing the same thing as you in terms of working on a big assumption, and that you met with them weekly, or maybe even in some case, Next Jump has people meet daily, but you met with them regularly and had a very concise protocol for sharing with each other what you were working on,
right.
The experiments that you did, and what you were learning from those.
Right.
And they had a protocol for how to give you feedback,
right.
and how to help you challenge your big assumptions and maybe develop the next experiment.
Right.
And
what are some of those things? I was looking in your book because I know you have those protocols. So I have down, and I don't know if you have them in front of you. Do you have them in front of you so we could see what that would look like?
I don't have it right in front of me.
I have it in front of me. So so you may ask me.
Sure.
So you'd have a deliberately developmental buddy, right? And they would ask you, what did that experience bring up for you? Why do you think that had a response, reaction, thought, or fear? And I'd say, well, what happened when I did that is I got anxious because I was hitting the 20-minute mark, and it actually brought up fears that I still wouldn't even finish within that hour period. Okay, so then they would ask me, and I'd answer. They may ask you, as someone who knows me, so you may actually go out and so this is actually seek input about your growing edge. So you would go out to people and say, I really have an issue with respect to this kind of, not being present at work. Could you help me? I know you're a dear friend. We work out every day at the gym. Would you help me to help me grow and tell me what you observe that I could be doing differently that may make me more effective? And you could say, CJ, I see you doing the same thing when you're working out. When you're working out, I notice that you're not necessarily present. You're looking at your watch the whole time, wondering when the workout's going to be done instead of, right? I'm making stuff up, but am I on target?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
That's right. That's the kind of feedback that someone may give to you.
Right. And then it says create an immediate change map on your growing edge goal. Seek bite-sized, regular, meaningful feedback from trusted observers. So this would be, people, let's say that you're going to a meeting or your presentation and you'd ask for feedback. So that's a kind of example that we gave in part 1. And bring your manager into the growth area. Sorry, excuse me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then the other one is bring your manager. So I could say to my manager, hey, I'm really trying hard. I know our goal, and I'm just stretching us into what we talked about part 1. Let's say I work at Decurion, is that the name of it? And we're trying to increase the geographic presence of our theater. And I know that I have this thing where I'm not present when I'm working. I could say to my boss, what I've noticed? I know that you want me to, we have this huge stretch goal. And what I notice that I can do to make that better is be more present when I'm working. Could you help me ask during our one-on-ones, how are you doing on this goal? And so that would be an example of what you could do.
Sure.
And then,
depending on the boss and the relationship they have with them, but also say, and when you catch me, when you notice that I seem, not present, I'm not present at the meeting, or I'm, seem, distracted or not available to people, let me know.
Yeah.
Give me feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is an example. So that would be the home, because there's the edge, which we talked about, my edge, and the home would be creating a sense of, I guess, sort of home support group. Is that right?
Yeah, having people who are, support, with the way we talk about it a lot of times, is kind of support and accountability partners.
Right.
Or developmental partners or developmental buddies, that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, that's the home. And then the groove idea is just to having regular practices. So having a set time. Okay, every Thursday morning, over coffee, we're going to meet and we'll go through our little protocol.
Right.
Would be an example of that.
Right.
CJ, you told me yesterday of a great practice that you and your husband have on Wednesday morning, and I thought it was a terrific, example of this. I know I'm turning the tables here.
I walk around the lake with my husband. To just share, I walk around the lake with my husband every week, and we both are working on various goals. We're soulmates, and so I say to him, hey, how is that? I know that you're working on this particular issue. How's that going? And he'll tell me about stuff, and I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. And I'll be part cheerleader, like, wow, that's really great. Like, I'm just noticing that you're doing this stuff, and it's just, I'm so happy. Like for him recently, I just am so happy. What I'm noticing is that all these things are happening for you and on the inside, and that is providing like a really strong foundation from which your book is going to grow. And I'm just, God, it's just so exciting to see. And each week that we're coming, I see you getting clearer and clearer about, your role and what the book is going to be. And that's super exciting. What are you going to do about whatever, or I notice that when you're talking about it, I still notice that you're thinking about this, what are you going to do? Or he'll bring up something that says proactively, I'm noticing even though I'm doing this, I'm still worried about my ego. That was literally our conversation. I'm still worried about my ego, because I worry about what the book reviews and should I actually get the publisher, and I have to tell myself, no, can't do that. I'm like, yeah, that's great. And so next time I'll probably be asking him like, well, what's happening? What how's the book going? How are things going with it? How's your ego going? And so I'm kind of his accountability / wife / partner / all those things coach.
Yeah. No, that's a great example of a kind of groove, a practice. And what you're doing, you also highlight something we haven't touched on, that part of what home is about, and part of what, good home is about also recognizing the particular strengths of the other person, the other people, and making those, even more visible to them. So it's not just about, feedback in the constructive criticism sense, or feedback in the, sense of let's drill down to see where you missed, this or that, or why you're struggling. It's also a recognition and an affirmation of the strengths that you already have. And sometimes it takes someone else to be consistently seeing that in you. And to be able to see yourself through their eyes.
Right.
That enables you to sort of remember, oh, okay, I do bring something to the party here. I'm not helpless or hopeless. Yes,
right.
Yes, there's things I need to work on.
Right.
But I can do that.
Right. Yeah. So that was our practice, and I know we have even more to talk about. It's hard to believe, but if folks want to actually learn more about DDOs, make sure to get this book, And Everyone Cultured: Becoming a Deliberately Developmental Organization, of which our guest Andy Fleming is a contributor of this, as well as the CEO and founding principal of WayToGrowInc.com. It means so much to me that you're listening to the show, and love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.